What's the story behind the first ever Thanksgiving feast? When was it? Where was it? Who was there? What did they eat? Does turkey really make you tired, or is it all just a giant conspiracy invented by the energy drink companies? That and more on this episode of History's News. Welcome back to History's News. I'm your host, Bob Bababadoboo, and to help us uncover the mysteries behind the first Thanksgiving, we have a reporter live on the scene in Johnson. John, lovely to have you back. Let's start with the basics. Where are you? When are you?
Hi, Bob. Yeah, I am here in Plymouth Colony, Massachusetts. The year is 1621, and the first ever Thanksgiving feast just wrapped up a few hours ago. Now, while traditional or common Thanksgiving feasts nowadays last an afternoon or a day, this feast lasted 3 whole days.
3 whole days? My God, man! I would need to wear sweatpants for a week after that. What can you tell us about the people there, John? Who was at the first Thanksgiving feast?
Bob, there are 2 main groups here at this first Thanksgiving. The first is the Wampanoag tribe, who had about 90 members attend. The other group are the Pilgrims, who had about 50 members attend. Now, the Wampanoags have been in this area for a while. This is their home. The Pilgrims recently came over on the Mayflower in 1620.
Was it raining a lot there, John? Because, you know, April showers bring Mayflowers.
I can't really speak to that, Bob, but weather did have a big role in why we are here today. You see, the Pilgrims landed last November, right before the extremely harsh New England winter. They also didn't know much about the land they were going to. They didn't know what crops they could grow, what food was safe to eat, and so on. They also didn't really have a whole lot of time to prepare, since it was already November and winter was upon them. Lastly, they didn't have a whole lot to eat because they ate most of it during their long voyage.
Man, John, no offense to the Pilgrims, but they didn't seem too prepared. Seems like they're off to a little bit of a Plymouth rocky start.
Yeah, I'm just going to ignore that one, Bob, but you are kind of right. It was an extremely rocky start for the Pilgrims. In fairness to them, they weren't trying to land here. They were trying to land closer to New York. But due to the harsh conditions in the winter, only about half of them made it to spring.
Well, John, I'm having a little bit of a hard time seeing what the reason for the celebration was. Seems all kind of doom and gloom at this point.
Well, Bob, things did turn around for the Pilgrims. After spending most of the winter on the Mayflower, they came ashore in 1621. Within weeks, they were introduced to Squanto, who is better known as Squanto. Now, Squanto could speak English, so he could communicate with the Pilgrims. He and other members of the Wampanoag tribe taught them how to hunt, fish, and fertilize crops. Lastly, he and the chief of the Wampanoag tribe, Massasoit, formed an alliance with the Pilgrims.
Interesting, John. It really seems like Squanto and the Wampanoags saved the Pilgrims' behinds. But I still don't get it. What's the reason for the feast? Get to the food, man. I'm hungry.
Right. Okay, so after learning from the Wampanoags, the Pilgrims had their first successful corn harvest in the fall of this year. Now, they were so excited that they decided to have a feast to celebrate it.
Ah, I see. So naturally, they invited the Wampanoags to come and party with them.
Well, Bob, there is some debate about how this feast came together. You have to remember, what we know about the first Thanksgiving is mainly from very small journal entries by the Pilgrims and stories passed down from generation to generation by the Wampanoags. Some people say that the governor of Plymouth Colony invited the Wampanoags to the feast. Others say that while the Pilgrims were out hunting for the feast, the Wampanoags heard the gunshots and thought that the Pilgrims were going to war. Since they were allies, they rushed to help them. Once they arrived, they realized they were having a big feast and brought their own food to join in.
Well, that's pretty interesting there, John. I guess you could say there are 2 sides to every story. Wow, that's good. I'm going to trademark that.
Yeah, that's a very common saying, Bob.
Really? I've never heard of it. But John, it would be a mistake if I didn't ask you to bring home some green bean casserole for me and the wife, Susie. Did you bring any Tupperware?
No, I did not. But you might be surprised to know that the first Thanksgiving feast didn't have a lot of the foods that we have on Thanksgiving today. Most people believe the first Thanksgiving feast was a lot of seafood, corn, and other local vegetables.
John, I'm going to take that as a maybe. All right, well, we're just about out of time here, John. Anything else you want to add to the report?
Yeah, Bob, like most things in history, there is still some debate about whether this was truly the day of the first Thanksgiving. Some people think it happened earlier, others think it happened a few years later, in 1623. Also, while this feast is supposed to represent unity and togetherness, and really is one of the only instances in history of peace between Native Americans and colonists, it's sad to say that the peace between the two sides did not last long. Lastly, Thanksgiving wasn't made a national holiday until 1863, when Abraham Lincoln made it so.
Wow, some really amazing reporting there, John. Perhaps your finest work yet. Please don't forget the green bean casserole and safe travels home. Thank you, everyone, for joining us again on this edition of History's News, where we bring you the facts straight from the past. I'm your host, Bob Bababadoboo. Good night.